I'd like to introduce our featured and our speaker for today. It's Lindsay Troxel. She's the director of the Knowledge Lab and Professional Development at Janus Henderson. She is a life coach. She does personal coaching for individuals, professional coaching for advisors, as well as brings programs like this out to clients. Lindsay is a graduate from Babson College. She's got 14 years of experience in practice management, training, consulting, and coaching. And on a personal note, just to give you a little background on how Janus is different from a lot of the other firms that are out there. Janus, for the years, and I would say in the last 12 years, they used to have a program for financial advisors called Ironman Advisor, where we would have a weekly meeting, and I participated in this over the last decade, where they would talk about rest and sleep and being a whole person. That's very unusual in the financial services industry. You know, the financial services industry is typically an industry that they want you to run hard, and when you're exhausted, they want you to run even harder. And usually, you know, you slow down is when you collapse. But Janus has really taken a different approach. They started with advisors 10 years ago, and I feel very grateful to be able to participate in that program. And I'm excited to be able to know that Janus is now bringing this to our clients. So Lindsay, let me kick it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today and being our host, and looking forward to a great presentation.
Thanks, Craig. I'm really excited to be here today. I do love the fact that we at Janus Henderson are really thinking about the whole human. That idea that, you know, there is this interconnectedness between wealth and health, and the importance that we all need to be taking into consideration, especially as we continue to age. I'm going to, let's see, it sounds like maybe there's still someone that isn't quite on mute. What we're going to do throughout the session today, I would love for you to ask questions. And during the presentation, I think the best way for us to do that is through the chat feature. So if everybody knows where the chat feature is, please feel free, pepper your questions to me throughout the session. We'll also take some live questions so we can do some interacting at the end. That way we can get everybody situated and make sure that you know exactly what you want to be knowing as you leave our session today. Now, we all do know that brain-based diseases are problematic and that they are unfortunately on the rise. During the period of 2000 to 2018, we actually did a really wonderful job at reducing diseases like heart disease. We saw that decline by about 7.8% during that time frame. But during that same time frame, we saw Alzheimer's increase by 146%. I know personally, one of the reasons that this became such a passionate presentation for myself is a number of years ago, I found myself standing on stage in front of about 500 people grasping for a word. And that's the wrong time to be grasping for a word. Has anybody found themselves in a situation where they're like, you know, it's on the tip of my tongue? Yeah. Yeah, totally. We've all been there. Or what about walking into a room just to get in there and be like, why the heck did I come in here? Has anybody experienced that? Yeah, couple. Yeah. So we all know how important it is to keep our brain super, super healthy. But here's the thing, right? As we age, cognitive decline is just an inevitable part of that process. And unfortunately, there are certain things that are totally outside of our control, things like our age, our genetics, and our biological sex. But the good news is there's a whole bunch of it that is within our control. We can really reduce that cognitive decline over time just by paying attention to a number of things that we do daily. So we do have control over things like what we're eating, how much movement we are getting, the level of sleep and the stress that we carry around, our social engagement, even the kind of mental training that we participate in. We also, to a good extent, can control a number of the underlying diseases, things like diabetes and heart disease, obesity. A lot of those underlying diseases that we find are actually precursors to a lot of the brain-based diseases. So if we've got a lot of it within our control, why is it that we aren't taking action? Why is it that, life can sometimes just get in the way? The reason is because we don't necessarily tie ourselves powerfully to the purpose that will keep us taking action on those things every single day. So today, what we're going to do is we're really going to dive in. We're going to talk about the cognitive decline, kind of that normal process of aging, especially the elements that we have within our control. And then we're going to look at the things that maybe we are doing individually. We're also going to talk a lot about cognitive fitness, and we're going to discuss all of the new kind of findings that are out there that are wonderful for us. For a long time, and at least up until about the 1990s, scientists believed that the brain wasn't as plastic as it is. So the neuroplasticity that we now know is truly available to us wasn't something that we thought in the past. We thought that, if your brain was having some cognitive decline taking place, that was just where you are. And that's not true. We have the ability to make our brains even more plastic today, no matter what age we are. So that's really great news. And then we're going to talk about, again, that power of purpose, the why behind taking action with these small habits every single day. Now, everybody should have a workbook. Does everybody, at least everybody that I can see here on the call today, have a workbook that goes along with this program? If not, for some reason, please reach back out to Craig and team. You don't need it for our session today, but you will want to use it after the session because it's got a ton of really amazing information in there for you that you will find super helpful. The first part of that is our Brain Fab 5 assessment. So this is going to take you through that process of understanding where you are today. Did anybody take that assessment already ahead of time? Okay, Craig's got it, but okay. And that's all right. That's all right. So what I want you to do after the session is go back and start to assess yourself in these 5 areas. The first one we're going to talk about is food as fuel. For a lot of us, think about the fact that food is kind of everywhere around us. At one point in time, we didn't have a 7-Eleven on every single corner. We didn't have access to grocery stores the way that we do now. But finding food isn't as challenging as it was back in the days of like hunting and gathering. So what we want to do is make sure that we're not over fueling our body or over consuming foods that are just really not good for us. What we want to be doing is paying attention to the overall gut-brain connection that we have. And the gut-brain axis really refers to that physical and also the chemical connections between your gut and your brain, which are essentially neurotransmitters and other chemicals that are produced inside of the gut that also impact the way that our brain performs. So essentially, by changing the types of bacteria inside of our gut, by removing, any of the fast processed foods and replacing it with really wonderful, heavy antioxidant, phytonutrients, wonderful, leafy greens, more of a Mediterranean style diet. And in fact, if you look in the workbook, you've got a lot of resources there all around the Mediterranean style diet. But those, fish that are rich in fatty acids and extra virgin olive oils and actual olives and all of those beautiful, beautiful Mediterranean foods, you can enhance the healthy bacteria in your gut that will end up enhancing the performance of your brain. So what we want to do is make sure that we are eating that light and frequent Mediterranean diet. So almost every 3 to 4 hours, we're making sure that we're getting smaller meals, kind of snacking meals. That way we maintain a steady state of glucose throughout the course of the day. Has anybody ever gotten hangry before? Deb's like, yes, I know what hangry feels like. I too know what hangry feels like when we have those massive dips in our glucose levels and our brains are kind of going a little bit crazy. That's what hanger is. So we want to make sure we're regulating that throughout the course of the day. And when we get too much food and we have more glucose in our system, one, it ends up storing that excess glucose as fat, but also it kind of creates a dulling sensation. That's why if you ever, think about after that Thanksgiving dinner, yes, we've got turkey with the tryptophan, which is impacting the way that we're feeling, but also we tend to overeat. Therefore, we start to feel super sluggish and our brains start to get a little bit foggy. So what we want to do is maintain that steady state of glucose. We also know there's a lot of wonderful research coming out from the Mayo Clinic all around how Alzheimer's is being considered diabetes type 3. So again, that all has to do with the insulin resistance inside of the brain. When it's trying to get the glucose into the brain, the insulin's not able to regulate it and actually get it through the cell wall the way it's supposed to. And that resistance to the insulin is really leaving the brain underfueled because glucose is the primary fuel for the brain. So what we want to do again is make sure we're maintaining that steady state. Now, a couple of tools that I use, when I'm going out to dinner, I might actually get like a box ahead of time from the waiter just to, take half of the meal and throw it into the box so I'm not tempted to overeat. Also use smaller plates. I don't know about you, but sometimes you feel a little bit compelled to fill up the entire plate. If you're using smaller plates, then it just makes you feel as though you're eating a little bit more. Another thing that I do every single Sunday without fail is I meal prep all of my meals for the week. It only takes me because I've gotten really, really good at truly using food as fuel and thinking about how am I going to fuel myself throughout the course of the day. It's no longer like a pleasure center. And the brain, it's so interesting. The brain has been designed to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and expend the least amount of energy as humanly possible. So when we find ourselves in a situation where we haven't used our prefrontal cortex to think through the choices that we're making, especially when it comes to food, we automatically will go to something that will seek more pleasure and expend the least amount of energy. And so usually that doesn't end up being a great choice. So what I do is every single Sunday, I meal prep all of my meals for the week, including my snacks. That way, when I get to the moment, I can thank my previous self for actually using my prefrontal cortex instead of my lizard brain in the moment to make those decisions.
Lindsay, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah, please.
How do you hold yourself accountable for that? Because it's an easy thing to do, but it's also an easy thing not to do. I mean, I could see myself doing it like for a week or two, and then something comes up, and then next thing you know, I'm back to not doing it.
Yeah. And that goes back to, these are super simple solutions, right? It's not hard to do any of this, but for some of us, and you're not alone thinking, I might do this for a couple of weeks and then I slip back. It all comes back to the power of purpose. If we don't have a compelling enough reason for why we want to do this, then it's very easy to let other things get in the way. So sitting down and really making a decision, why do I want to do this? Is it important enough? And maybe for you right now, it's not about brain health, but for some of us on this call, maybe it is. Maybe for you, it's, something else. Maybe you're, trying to train for a marathon. Maybe you're trying to do something that requires a very specific diet and regimen. But anything, if we practice with enough time, we think that we need to use willpower in terms of driving us through that barrier, but really it's power of purpose. And so if we have a really compelling reason, every time something bubbles up, then the other thing that we would want to do is pay attention to the feelings that we have. So if you get to the moment and you're like, I don't really want to do this right now, notice the feeling that generates. And if it's something like, tends to be something like shame or relief. If you ever feel relief, you're kind of letting yourself off the hook and ask yourself, is that feeling the feeling that I want to be feeling right now? So it's just paying attention to the stories that you're telling yourself and reattaching yourself to your purpose. My purpose every single morning before my feet hit the ground, there's two things that I do. I take a deep breath in for 5 and then a massive exhale for 6. And what that does is it puts our body, our nervous system into the parasympathetic versus being in the sympathetic, which is all about, fight or flight and, trying to make sure there's no lions or tigers or bears inside of our bedroom. So I do that first. And then the next thing that I do is I tell myself my purpose. And my purpose is to be an example of what is possible for others through managing my mind. Okay. And so that's whenever I think about that and I recite it to myself a couple of times a day, the decisions that I make, I have to ask myself, am I being an example of what is possible, or am I letting myself off the hook? Was that helpful, Craig?
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. So let's talk about activity, because it's activating. Once we start fueling our body for the fuel that we need, we now have all of this energy, but we need to start moving the body in order to get the blood pumping, our oxygen, mixing with the blood and the glucose and get it going where it needs to go, like our muscles and our brain. So the longer that we sit, the more at risk we are for a number of those health-related issues that are actually a precursor to Alzheimer's and dementia. So what we want to do is make sure we're getting enough strategic movement throughout the course of the day. Little things like parking a little bit further away from the entry to a grocery store, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, doing, setting some alarms throughout the course of the day on our phone so we remember that we need to stretch. How many of you find yourself sitting for longer than 90 minutes? Yeah. We all, I mean, even if we're just sitting there watching a movie, right? We all find ourselves at some point in time sitting for longer than we really should. So if we make sure that we incorporate some of those tools, like setting alarms, anybody have a dog? Taking the dog on a walk, really, it's funny. This morning, I was running around a little bit late. And I thought, I could just let the dog out into the backyard today. It's perfectly fine. Nobody's going to know. This will just be our little secret. And then I was like, no. We need to at least do our primary loop. We have to do that. That is something we do every morning. And in that moment, my purpose was almost less about me. And I was like, I cannot, in good conscience, just let him into the backyard and not take him on a walk, because he's going to be sitting there all day, just hanging out, right? So that guy needs some walking too. So finding ways to incorporate strategic movement into our day. We want to be getting some bigger movements every about 120 minutes. So even things like body weight movement, really, really helpful. Now, Craig, you went through the Ironman Advisor. That was all based on a program from the Human Performance Institute at Johnson & Johnson. One thing, if anybody's looking to add some very simple strategic movement exercise into their day, they have this app that's called the 7-Minute Workout. Okay, 7-Minute Workout. You can download it on the App Store. It's got a red icon with 7 white circles. It's the 7-Minute Workout by Johnson & Johnson. And that's 12 body weight movements that you can do. And if you're just starting out, incorporating more of that strategic movement into your day, this is a great tool for you. What it will do is increase the BDNF production inside of your brain. That stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And that is a growth hormone that actually stimulates the growth of new cells inside of the brain. So if we're talking about how do we improve brain function, just having some additional exercise in your life is like miracle grow for the brain. So really quite fascinating. All right, let's talk about stress. Who's stressed? Anybody stressed? It's been a little bit of a stressful time as of late. I don't know if you've experienced something similar, but yeah. So stress is toxic for the brain. In fact, stress and the overproduction of cortisol has a shrinking effect on our prefrontal cortex, and then an enlarging effect on our amygdala. So those two things combined are absolutely devastating when it comes to interacting with people throughout the course of the day. So if you've got, or if you know somebody who's overly stressed, and when you have conversations with them and you're like, they're reacting a little bit, out of the ordinary, or maybe they're overreacting to this situation, it could be because they have that enlarged amygdala. The amygdala is the center of the brain that's responsible for telling your brain whether or not you should be kicked into fight or flight. So if you've got that enlarged amygdala and that shrunk prefrontal cortex, your reasoning centers are off. So it's no wonder that those people that are super stressed continue to find themselves in situations that just perpetuate the stress. So finding ways to reduce that cortisol is really critically important for your overall brain function. Meditation, taking long walks, gratitude. Gratitude is my favorite stress reducing regulator. In fact, just writing down 3 things that you are grateful for every single day. They don't have to be massive. It could be, grateful for the cup of tea that I had this morning, or that walk that I actually took, whatever it is. Just writing down 3 things has a regulating effect for that cortisol. So it will start to reset your brain and then give you a better perspective on what is happening in your life. So just finding ways to reduce some of your stress. Something that you love, dancing, singing, just listening to music. Find 1 or 2 things that will help you to regulate very quickly. We believe that it's the circumstances that are outside of us in life that cause us to experience the stress that we have, when in reality, it's not actually the thing that took place, but rather how we are choosing to think about it. So if, think about when we first had the pandemic start and we were doing these video conferences, that little dog back there, he would be barking like crazy. And when he would bark, I would immediately have this thought, like, this is so unprofessional. I cannot believe he's barking right now. That thought caused me to experience stress. It wasn't him actually barking. It was the way I was thinking about his barking. So over time, what I did was I recalibrated so that when he would bark, instead of thinking, this is so unprofessional, I would think, dogs bark, and people understand that, which then resulted in a feeling of calm. So just notice that you are more in control of the stress that you carry around than we typically believe we are. It does recover there, and the stronger you make it. So doing things like exercising, increasing that BDNF, making sure that you're eating the right foods, all of that the body wants to heal itself. Absolutely wants to heal itself. There could be some underlying patterns, like triggers, if you will, that could quickly kick you back into stress if you aren't paying attention to the thoughts that you are having. But from a physiological standpoint, the brain really can repair itself as long as you're doing these Fab 5. There's still some research that's being done there to really home in. If you are pretty concerned about it, I would actually go in and have him tested. You can go in and work with a doctor to have them perform a couple of tests to see kind of where he is, and then do a number of the things that we're talking about today, and then go back in and have them retested again. That would be my first recommendation, to give you like a baseline. But a lot of this you can start to regulate. Again, doing all 5 of these together has the greatest effect for you, because it's not one or the other. For example, for me, when I first started, I started with movement. And when you start with movement and getting some of the blood flowing, then for me, I just started fueling my body more effectively. And then my sleep just started to regulate itself, as well as my stress. And then we'll talk about social life here in just a moment. But you most certainly can repair. The body wants to repair itself. It wants to be in this state of homeostasis. And all we need to do are start removing some of those external factors, as well as managing our thoughts to really set us back to that place. So I would venture to guess that he's probably going to be able to at least do enough in order to reverse some of that damage from before. But I would also remember the power of purpose. Okay, let's go back and also start talking about, for those of us that are still working, our purpose sometimes is very different than once we retire. And there are a lot of individuals that don't take the kind of steps that they need to be taking, they feel as though I've lost my primary purpose, or I don't now know exactly what my next purpose is going to be. Therefore, they don't have enough resilience in these 5 areas that we're talking about right now. So I would have him sit down and really define, what is my next stage purpose? Right? What is my reason for continuing to live and engage and really work on getting enough rest and recovery? Because the last thing that we also want to do is go from being like, go, 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 to let's now just rest a ton. So resetting our nervous system, things like magnesium salt baths, the magnesium bath is one of them, just throw some Epsom salts into a tub and do like 30 minutes a day and just practice breathing. And so over time, he will be able to reset and start to get the restful sleep that he really needs. Let's talk a little bit more about sleep, right? Because a lot of people do have some issues with it. What we want to be doing is getting that good 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Everybody's a little bit different, but like we want to get enough so that we can go through all of our sleep cycles 4 to 5 times throughout the course of the evening. And what we're really trying to do is maximize our deep sleep and our REM sleep. And those are stages 3 and 4, so that we can get the benefits of the toxin removal. So there's a lot of oxidative stress that builds up inside of the brain as we are going through our day. And at night, that's when I always like to think that there's like a little cleaner that comes in and does some vacuuming and some dusting and removing the cobwebs. But that's taking place during the night while we sleep. So if we are skimping out on it, if we have been, carrying around the stress because of work and not managing our stress properly beforehand, we are going to plummet some of our functions of like learning new things. Now, again, there is a spectrum in there where you can reverse it. So definitely starting to work on that is going to be helpful. But what we want to do is we want to start to repair, essentially, like the hippocampus is the part of the brain that's responsible for processing memories and learning new information. So what we want to do is start to heal those areas that are starting to get a little bit worn out. The way I would suggest people do this is, again, thinking about some relaxation techniques and creating a really healthy sleep hygiene routine. So what are you doing the 2 to 3 hours before you're getting in bed? Sleep, our performance during the course of the day is reduced. So it takes us longer to do things that could have taken us less time, right? You know this, you've been screaming this at him for years, right? Yeah, of course. And he's like, no, I got this. So yeah, what we want to do is create a healthy sleep routine. So even in retirement, what I would highly recommend is we can't really catch up on sleep. Okay. That's not actually something that we can do. So still keeping a healthy sleep routine where there is a defined bedtime and a defined wake up time, really, really important. Okay. You might give him a couple of days where he sleeps in, but then we go right back to defined bedtime, defined wake up time, even on the weekends. That way we start to set our circadian rhythm. And other things that we can do, you might, if he's got a hard time falling asleep, I had a really hard time falling asleep, just like shutting off my brain. I'm going to show you this. So I got one of these. This is right here. This is a bright light. I'll turn it on see that? All right. So that's a bright light therapy. And a lot of people use them for like seasonal affective disorder, but you also can use it to reset your circadian rhythm so that during the day you feel like you've got more energy. And then at night, it's easier to fall asleep. I used to be one of those people that my head would hit the pillow and I would just be thinking about all of the things throughout the course of the day. I had tried magnesium supplements. I had tried, melatonin, all of the things that, you kind of immediately think like, how can I take something that's going to help me with this process? And I decided they didn't work very well. And 2, I didn't want to have to take something in order to fall asleep. And then I found this, and this has been a game changer. I've been using it now for about 3 months, and I actually can fall asleep when I want to, and I wake up feeling more refreshed. So it's one of those things that's been really, really helpful. All I would recommend is that, again, you check with your doctor whenever you're trying a new routine, because there are some medications that interact with light, right? So just double check anybody that is trying any of these techniques. You check with your doctor to make sure they work with your particular needs. Couple other things: making sure your bedroom is nice and dark. Making sure you've got it at that comfortable sleeping temperature, which is actually, does anybody know what the ideal sleeping temperature is? 65?
Yes.
You're right in the range. It's 62 to 68. Okay. So really wonderful sleeping, and anything below that is going to cause some restlessness. Anything above that is also going to cause some restlessness. So making sure that we are getting, setting ourselves up for really restful night's sleep, removing all of those electronic devices from our bedroom, getting rid of the TV if we've got one in there. All of those will really help to get that restful night's sleep. All right, let's talk about the one that's going to apparently kill Craig. That's social life. This for a long time was mine. Prior to the pandemic, I think I was a little burnt out. And so I kept telling people that I was an introvert, and that was like a life-saving mechanism for me to try to, get a little bit of reprieve. But I've definitely realized that I'm not an introvert. I'm definitely not an introvert. However, social life and social connections and deep and meaningful connections are so critically important, especially as we age. During our working years, we have these built-in systems and networks that we, spend about 70% of our day with our coworkers. And then after we retire, we lose that natural built-in networking system, and we need to replace that with some other form of social interaction. We are social animals. Our biological, psychological, social systems, they've all evolved in those collaborative networks and communities. So the impacts of social isolation and loneliness to health and our mortality are actually similar to that of high blood pressure and obesity. And in fact, there was this study that was done that was published in the Harvard Journal of Medicine that was done on it was 309,000 participants. And they found that lack of strong relationships increased the risk of premature death by any reason by up to 50%. Okay. That's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So super important to find social connections and sources, making sure that, either we're replacing it through religious connections, through, for a while I was doing CrossFit and going to the gym, and we had a lot of social connections there. I'm now part of this social club here in Denver that does a lot of like wellness type things. So finding a way to replace those social systems when we don't necessarily have them, especially right now. I mean, we're coming out of the pandemic. If there's been anybody in your life that you haven't connected with, please reach out to them, because I think that this is what is going to have the greatest impact in a very negative way from the pandemic. It's those unintended consequences of the lack of social connection more than anything else. So finding a way to replace that is going to be critically important. So those are the Fab Five. Those are what we really need to maintain in order to have that healthy working brain, and very simple solutions that you can incorporate into your day. But let's talk about, now that we've got the base, what do we need to do in order to improve our overall cognitive fitness? And as I mentioned earlier, the advancements in neuroscience have told us, now we know that there's no reason why your brain at 60, 65, 70 can't be as competent as it was at 25. So that's great news for all of us. And our brain's alertness is the result of what we call cognitive fitness. That's really just a state of optimized ability to reason, remember, learn, plan, exercise, play, all of it pulled together. So the more cognitively fit we are, the better we are able to make decisions, solve problems, and deal with the stress of change. it also is going to, just in general, allow us to perform at our best. So what we want to do is make sure that we are staying cognitively fit. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how the brain works. And this is super, super high level. So essentially, as we are growing, as we are aging, up until about the age of 11, when we are learning new things, our brains are really this green field of the mind. And as we learn those new things, we start to build in these kind of wagon wheel tracks that you see here on the screen. It's essentially like a newly explored territory. And as we continue to practice those things with repetition, over time, we start to pave over the roads and fill in the potholes and make it easier for us to move a little bit faster. And before you know it, after we've practiced with repetition enough times, it really turns our brain into this super highway. Now, if you remember before, I told you that our brains were designed to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and expend the least amount of energy as humanly possible. 95% of what we do every single day is non-conscious and automatic. We only have 5% of what we do where we're actually using our cognitive effort to think about what is about to happen. And that's, again, because the brain wants to expend the least amount of energy. And so it's been designed as part of that, survival technique so that we can go about our day and then also be on the lookout for things that are going to kill us. And so if you're thinking about driving down the road, you're not really thinking about how do I do my turn signal or, step on the brake or the gas. Your brain is just doing that for you so that you can watch out for the little kid with the bouncing ball that's about to, come in front of your car, right? It's designed so only 5% you need to be paying attention to all of those things that might be different. So this is great as long as things are serving you. But if they're not serving you and you've still got these built-in habits, you could be doing things with repetition without even really recognizing it. I'm going to give you an example here. So there was one day that I was leaving work. This was about 2 years ago. I was leaving work and I was driving home and I was thinking about, all of the things that I had done throughout the course of the day, the last meeting I was on, what I was going to cook for dinner. I think I was going on a trip the next day. So I was thinking about what do I need to pack? And I get all the way home and I'm about to get out of the car. And I look up and I'm like, I'm at the wrong house. Have you ever driven home and ended up at the wrong house?
No.
Not many people do. No. I had moved, however, about 2 weeks earlier.
Oh, okay.
And I was just so in my head that my brain went into autopilot and it drove me home. But it was the wrong house because I hadn't yet practiced with enough repetition driving to the new house. So I just went into, cognitive drive and used the neural pathway that was already built in. So you actually need to practice whatever it is that you're trying to do to create a neural pathway for 5 minutes every single day for about 6 weeks in order for it to become a new neural pathway. But the good news is you have the ability to do it. It's what we call cognitive flexibility, and it's part of the neuroplasticity that we build in our brain. And the more we practice to have a neuroplastic brain through flexibility, the more we can do this. In order to improve the flexibility in our brain is we want to start to test it out. Okay. And we're going to do this together. So this will be kind of fun, and you don't need to take yourself off mute in order to do this, but we're going to read the word that we see on the screen, and we're going to go across the top line, and we're going to do this as fast as we possibly can, where we will just, go blue, red, yellow, orange, and then go to the next line. Okay. We're going to fast as we possibly can. Ready, go. Blue, red, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, yellow, red, blue, orange, blue, yellow, red, green, orange, blue, purple, yellow, blue, orange. Pretty simple, right? Not too hard. We all know those words. Our brains see them and they process pretty quickly. Now what I want us to do is I want you to say the color that you see. Do not read the word. Okay? And I'm going to pick on either Deb or Craig. We're going to say, it would go green, purple, orange, red, right? And then just do the same thing. All right.
Yep.
Say the color, don't read the word. Ready? Go.
Green, purple, orange, red, yellow, red, blue, green, orange, green, yellow, red, green, yellow, purple, blue, blue, purple, red, yellow, purple, blue, yellow, orange.
Great job. How did that feel?
Awkward.
Awkward. Yeah, it takes about 2 times the speed. It takes us 2 times longer to read or at least say the color than we did reading the word. This is called the Stroop test. And this was really designed to help test out the effect of altitude on climbers. And so what's interesting is this is a wonderful example of flexibility in the brain because we can do it. You did it, right? But it was a little bit more challenging. But if you practice this over time, your brain will start to make these connections and start to, again, be more neuroplastic. So things that are examples that you can do that will help build up that neuroplasticity and that brain flexibility are things like gratitude lists and journaling and storytelling. We usually all have stories that we tell ourselves that aren't actually fact, but we believe them so much. Like we tell ourselves the story over and over and over again that we believe it to be true. So telling ourselves a new story around something really has the ability to start helping our brains be more flexible. And this is so critically important in terms of, how we perceive things. Our perception is way more important than the actual experience. So going through this practice will ultimately help us optimize the way that we go through life. So I would say one of the things you should try after this session today is find a story that you've been telling yourself that maybe hasn't been serving you. What's something that you believe to be true that isn't actually fact, but you believe it so deeply for however long you've been believing it. And then ask yourself, well, what do I want to believe instead? What's the new story that I want to start telling myself? And then see how that starts to change your perception. All right, we're coming up towards the end here, and I want to give you one more quick little tool and technique before we open it up here for a couple minutes of questioning. So the next part of building up our cognitive fitness, just like you would in an exercise routine, we just talked about flexibility. Now we're going to talk about strength. And what we're talking about when we're talking about building strength is actually making the cells and the connections stronger. And then helping to form new connections, thereby making the communication inside of the brain more effective and efficient. So one of the things that we can do in order to build up the strength in our brain and do more like memory training are things like this. Now, inside your workbook, you've got all of these pictures. You've also got that Stroop test that we just did. So if you wanted to do that, like with loved ones, you can play around with that frequently. But here's what I want you to do with this memory game. So I want you to get a clock, take your phone out, set a timer, and I want you to time yourself for 60 seconds, memorizing all of the pictures that you see in the order that they are. Then I want you to set another timer for another 60 seconds and walk away. Then I want you to come back and set another timer for another 60 seconds and try to recall everything that you saw in the order that you saw it. Okay. Now, this process, however many you get, that's kind of your baseline. And you can test yourself over the course of a couple of days and see how well it improves. And it'll give you a wonderful baseline for some of the ways that you can start to build your memory. Okay. Now, some people will do things like develop some sort of system. So maybe it's a mnemonic device. You use the first letter of every single picture, like umbrella, U, book, B, like create yourself a mnemonic device. Maybe you tell a story. So maybe you say like, it was raining outside. So I stayed in and read a book. But when I finished the book, we played some piano, but then the sun came out. So I took the dog for a walk, but I left my sunglasses at home. So I stopped into a coffee shop, creating that story to tell all the way through. Other people that are trying to remember massive quantities of data, like people that are winning Guinness Book of World Records, they create mind maps for themselves. And that's essentially like walking through a location that you know really, really well, like your house. And as you're walking through, like front door, you place each one of these items in a location as you're navigating a path through the house. So that way, as you try to recall it, you're able to just walk through the house and again, look at the things as you walk through. So whatever works for you, trying out either one of those techniques would be one way to go. You can also just, again, do a baseline, see what you can remember. What happens when people are getting their memory tested is essentially the doctors will ask you questions around what are the things that you typically can't remember? Where are are you forgetting your keys? Are you forgetting people's names, words, faces? Like, what are the things that you're typically forgetting? And then they build an entire training program for you based on what is actually happening. So again, if anybody's interested in really going in and getting tested, it's a really wonderful place to start. So here are some of the exercises that you can use. I'm going to walk over here for a second. This is a book that I love. These are really silly. And I'll send this over to you guys with a list of other books that I really like. But this is 399 games, puzzles, and trivia challenges, specially designed to keep your brain young. And what I love about this is that it targets the 6 key areas of cognitive functions. So long-term memory, working memory, executive functioning, attention to detail, multitasking, and then processing speed. So these are really silly, but they work, which I like. All right, with the last second here, I'm going to bring it back to what I said in the beginning. Purpose is what keeps us going here. If we don't have a reason for why we want to, be eating better or exercising more or doing some of this mental training, if there's not a reason why, of course, we're not going to stay the course. It's going to become very hard for us to do so. But if we develop that no matter what reason, if we, say that we want to live longer and not, burden our loved ones with the elements of Alzheimer's or dementia, if we want to be writing a book, maybe traveling the world, whatever it is for you, you get to decide. But coming up with that reason, coming up with that purpose, especially once we retire, that keeps us going every single day. Dan Buttner was the author of The Blue Zones. Has anybody read The Blue Zones? Really great book that I would highly recommend. It's all about the areas around the world where people are living longer than most. And so there are these pockets, Okinawa is one of them. There's these pockets where people are just living life. And the Fab Five is really based on those. So for most of the people, they do a lot of walking. They've got a centralized square where a lot of people congregate, so they get the social interaction. They're eating more of the Mediterranean type diet, where they've got really wonderful access to beautiful vegetables, and they're incorporating really healthy fats, which is really the premise of it. It doesn't mean that you actually need to be in the Mediterranean or eating specifically the way you might in the Mediterranean. It's more of the combination between really wonderful vegetables and healthy fats combined together. So they found that in these areas, people were just living longer, healthier, happier lives. And so using the Fab Five, as well as this power of purpose, in Okinawa, they actually call, they have a word for this. It's called ikigai. And ikigai is like, it's all about, your reason for living. And so finding a way to replace whatever it is, in the years that you were working, your purpose to get you out of bed every single morning, what is now going to be the thing that keeps you focused on what you say you want to do? And so those that really find that ability to sit down and develop that purpose have a much easier time sticking to the habits that they build. Inside your workbook, you have an exercise that will take you through coming up with that purpose. I always think that, it's can be a little bit challenging to just jump into ultimate purpose. Like, why am I here to live? Walk your way into it. Like, decide, what is my purpose today? What is my purpose this week? What is my purpose for the next 21 days? Make your way to something. I didn't come up with my ultimate purpose right away. It evolved over time. I kept revisiting it and saying, okay, does this feel right? Is this how I want to phrase it? Does this still, do my habits and my beliefs and my values align? What is it that I really want to hold on to? And then I still develop multiple purposes as I'm working on new things. I know we're at the end of our time here.